What's up everyone, welcome back to Just Finish Coding. Since a chunk of my audience are actually total beginners, I decided to make a series that's dedicated to these guys. I just found that so many scratchers just follow YouTube code like robots, even though they basically have no idea what they're doing. So in this series, I'm dedicating this completely for total beginners, and you will learn how to make a pretty neat cat and apple game. Let's get right into it.
Just finished coding.
So now when I actually hit the green flag, I can move the cat around with the arrow keys, and whenever I actually hit the apple, you can see it produces a nice chomp sound effect. Now I've kept the sound effect to be as minimal of a volume as possible, but I think you get the picture, and we can actually increase the volume when we're actually coding our game. When the time finally gets to 0, you can see that at the end we have a nice end screen that's going to pop up. We have our score showing right here as well as on the top right, and this is all a pretty nice game, and that is what you will be learning to make in this Scratch series. The first thing that you'd want to do is to open up a Scratch editor of your choice. I recommend going with the Scratch 3 online editor to begin with, and once you start to get a little more sophisticated, you can actually download the offline editor and get into your code offline. But it's actually a matter of preference, and you could use any editor you want, including older versions like the Scratch 2 editor. Once you're actually set and done, your screen should look something like mine, and I've just switched to a full screen mode on Google Chrome since I'm using the Scratch 3 online editor. Now let's get into the code. Now I want the program to start when the green flag is clicked, or when this particular flag is clicked which says go. And to actually initialize our programs, what we need to do is to head over to events and grab this block of code which says when green flag is clicked. And this code is going to basically start, or rather if you have a script which has a lot of lines of code like this is just an example, and all this code is going to start only when this particular green flag is clicked, and that is what this block of code actually is going to be contributing to. So when the green flag is clicked, well, we just want to have this cat pop up, let's just say somewhere on the screen. I'm just going to make him go right to the center, and that's your x0, y0 coordinates. Now, if you're not sure how these coordinates work, it's actually pretty simple. It's just a simple graph, and illustrating this is pretty simple. So you can just click on your backdrop, and actually you don't have to do this. You can just look at the way I'm doing this, and you want to click on this thing which says XY grid, and now you can see the top of your screen is x0, y180, the top center I mean. The bottom is x0, y negative 180. The center left is going to be x negative 240, y0, and the right is going to be x240, y0. And that basically is your Scratch grid, and everything behaves like a normal graph. Now, if you're not sure how graphs work, then I would recommend going through your mathematics book a little bit just to find out how this works, because I mean that would just help you a lot with your Scratch code, especially moving sprites around. So since that's out of the way, I'm just going to go back to backdrops and delete that XY grid. Now let's head back to our code and then start with the initializations. So when the green flag is clicked, we made the cat go to the center of the stage, but really speaking, that's not the best idea. In the start of the game, if you remember correctly, we actually had the cat move to the bottom left corner, and we also reset the size of the cat. So that's what I'll be doing right at the beginning. The first thing I'll do is to make the cat move to the bottom left, and what you can actually do as a shortcut is to move the sprite around, and then you can look through your changed motion coordinates within the motion category of your code, and the coordinates update real time. So wherever your cat is, those would be the coordinates in your go to x, y coordinates. So I'm going to make it go, like I said, to the bottom left about this position, and then I'm going to be grabbing the motion block. So I'm going to make it go to approximately x negative 175 and y about negative 120. And these values should be working for you, and I'm just doing this so that all our values are the same and everyone is not stuck with a different value. Changing the size is also pretty simple. What you want to do now is to click on this block which says looks, and now you should see a whole new block, or blocks of code actually pop up. And now you just want to grab this one block of code which says set size to 100%, and you just want to change that. Don't worry about what these other blocks of code actually do. You'll get into them as you scratch more and more. So now we'll just set the size to something a little bit more manageable, and I'm going to be setting it to about 85%. And I think this cat is a much better cat. Actually, let's do 90% because I think that's what I used for my previous tutorial. There we are. I think this is more manageable, especially if we have, a cat eating an apple across a pretty small screen. 90 is a pretty good number. So once you're done with your size, now we have to configure the movements of the cats. And now there are actually two ways to do this. The first way is you could head over to events, and then you could grab this block of code which says when space key is pressed, and you can change this, for example, to when up arrow key is pressed. And what you want to do inside the up arrow key, we'll get into that. But the other way you could do that is to grab a forever loop, put that right when your green flag is clicked, have an if then, and then head over to your sensing tab, and then grab this block which says if key space is pressed, and you can change that to up arrow, and then you could do whatever you want to perform basically when the up arrow is pressed, whether it's the animation, the movement, etc. All that code is going to either come inside of this if then, or it's going to come right below this when up arrow key is pressed. Now each one of these two methods has their own distinct advantages and disadvantages, and you might have actually noticed that doing this was a little bit more complicated. But it's actually, sometimes much better to use this if then method rather than this when up arrow key pressed. And this case is actually one of those. So when we do use this block from events which says when up arrow key is pressed, what that is going to prevent the user from doing is to basically spam the particular key. So if he keeps pressing the up arrow key or he just keeps holding on to it, for example, then the program isn't going to behave the same way it would when we have this block of code which says if up arrow key is pressed. Now that's a little bit complicated, and I'm not going to be getting into that in this first beginner tutorial, but just keep in mind that these two have their own distinct advantages and disadvantages, and most of the time you want to stick around with this if then, and as you get more and more into Scratch, you'll start using the other block of code as well. So for this project, I'm going to be using this key if key up arrow key is pressed. Alright, so when the up arrow key is pressed, let's actually first configure the movement of the sprite. Now the sprite basically has to move either upwards when the up arrow key is pressed or downwards when the down arrow key is pressed. So what we'll do is to just configure the movement by heading over to the motion tab and then grabbing this one block of code which says change y by 10, and you can change this depending on the speed which you want, and you might actually want to set a variable for this as you get a little more into Scratch, but for now I'm just going to leave this as a hard-coded value. So I'm going to change y by 8, and changing y by 8 is going to make it go upwards, and similarly changing y by -8 is going to be making the sprite go downwards. So what I'll do is to just duplicate this by right-clicking and clicking duplicate, change that up arrow key to down arrow key, and then I'll change this 8 to be -8 and put this right after this if then within the forever loop. And what this is going to enable us to do is when the green flag is clicked, you can see we can move the cat along the y-axis, and that's actually pretty cool. But it's still kind of boring because we don't have movement along the x-axis, and also there isn't really any animation behind this. So let's actually first get into the movement on the x-axis. So everything is going to be very similar, and you can actually just duplicate this entire thing, and you can change these keys to be the keys you want. So I'm going to change the up arrow to be the right arrow in the duplicated if-thens, and change the down arrow to be when key left arrow is pressed. And now you want to change both of these change y bys to change x bys. And you want to change x by pretty much the exact same value. When the right arrow key is pressed, you want to change x by 8. And when the left arrow key is pressed, you want to change x by -8. And that's all pretty simple. Just put that inside your forever loop, just like your other if statements. Now what this is going to enable you to do is when the green flag is clicked, you can test this out. Now you can see we can move the sprite across the stage. And this already looks like a pretty neat approach to doing this. And now let's actually get into more on our animations and how we can make this movement actually look much cooler than what it is right now. Now making your own animations, pictures and art and all of that can be a pretty challenging task. But lucky for us, Scratch actually comes up with a whole bunch of costumes that we can use for our projects. And just to give you some perspective, in our default sprite, which is sprite 1, the cat sprite itself, there's actually 2 costumes which you can use, and you can just access those by clicking on the costumes tab, and you can look at these 2 costumes. And now if I just keep switching between these costumes and you actually look at the cat, you can see that the cat sort of looks like it's running. And what we can do is to alternate between those 2 costumes fast enough, and that is going to give the illusion of, just switching images to be something of an actual motion that's happening. So if you want to just change the costume, all you have to do is to head over to the looks tab and grab this one block of code which says next costume. And you want to put that in each of your if-thens right after you change Y or X by the particular magnitude of your speed, or in this case it's just going to be 8. So right after that, just add in this code which says next costume, and once you're done with that and you hit the green flag, you can actually see that our cat moves. And although it doesn't look like the most greatest way of depicting the cat running, it certainly is a great improvement from what it originally was, with just stationary with a stationary cat just moving along the screen like a robot. And if you want to make this motion smoother, what you could do is to just change this, and you can make this change X and Y by like 10, 12 and so on. But I think for this project I'm just going to leave it at 8, and I think the movement is okay as it is. So the last thing I'm actually going to be doing is to initialize 2 variables, and that is the score of the player and also the time left, or the timer. And to do this, what you want to do is to head over to the variables tab, and you can just right click on that my variable and just click delete the my variable. And now you should have a clean window, this is a mini window, I guess, clean mini window pop up. And what you want to do is to click on make a new variable. And you can do this in any order you wish, but I'm going to be declaring the score first. So the first variable, I'm going to call it score. I'm going to set it for all sprites and then click OK. And then I'm going to declare another variable, and this is going to be called time left. And once again, make sure it's set for all sprites. Don't click this cloud variable. And most often, if you're actually a beginner, you wouldn't be something which scratch.mit considers a scratcher, and you wouldn't have this option by default. But if you see this option on your computer, make sure you do not enable it and you just have it as it is. So click OK, and now you can actually move these things around just the way you want them to actually show during your game. And one pretty cool trick that you could use is to just double click on your score, and you could see that there are a variety of depictions of this particular variable that you can choose from. Now for the score, I'm just going to double click on this once and have this pretty big tag show up, I guess, and I'm going to put it in my top right corner. And for the time left, I'm going to leave it as it is and I'm going to move it to the top left corner. And I think that's pretty nice. I mean, this looks exactly the way I want it to. And although I've not really done anything within these 2 variables, I have not really manipulated them or have not set them to anything, I think that will be it for this video. If you've enjoyed this video, please make sure you leave a like, and also don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.